Archangel Michael. The person who hurt you can't stay silent anymore. Stop. Don't scroll. Because if this message found you today, it is not an accident. Archangel Michael is standing before the gates of your destiny with a warning that was not meant for everyone. It was meant for you, and before this message ends, someone who wounded your heart, someone who lied, someone who betrayed your trust, someone who thought they would never face the consequences, will no longer be able to stay silent. But there is something even more shocking that Michael revealed. Something that changes everything. Stay with me. Because if you leave now, you may miss the very sign you've been praying for. For months, maybe years. You have carried a pain nobody truly understood. You smiled when your heart was breaking. You stayed silent when your soul wanted to scream. You forgave people who never apologized. You showed kindness to those who returned cruelty. And every night when nobody was watching, you asked heaven one question. God, do you see what happened to me? The answer is yes. God saw every tear, every disappointment, every betrayal. Every moment you felt abandoned. And according to Archangel Michael, the silence you've been living through is about to end. But before I tell you how, there is something you need to understand. The person who hurt you believed something. They believed time would erase their actions. They believed the truth would stay buried forever. They believed your kindness was weakness. But heaven has been watching, and heaven never forgets. Listen carefully, because this next part is not for everyone. Michael says there are people who smile in public while secretly carrying guilt, people who pretend they have moved on, people who act as though nothing happened. Yet every night, their conscience whispers your name. Every blessing they expected feels delayed. Every peace they wanted feels incomplete. Because there is a spiritual law many people ignore. What is hidden eventually comes into the light, and right now, something is moving behind the scenes. You can't see it. Not yet. But it is already happening. Have you noticed strange signs lately? Repeated numbers, unexpected memories, dreams that felt unusually real, people mentioning someone from your past? Those are not random. They are clues. Pieces of a bigger picture. Because heaven has begun shifting circumstances. And the person who hurt you is starting to feel pressure they cannot explain. At first they ignored it, then they denied it. Then they tried distracting themselves. But the pressure keeps growing. Why? Because truth has a voice. And eventually, truth demands to be heard. Now here is where the story becomes powerful. Most people think divine justice looks like punishment, but Michael says something different. Sometimes divine justice begins with conviction, a stirring inside the soul, a feeling that refuses to disappear. A realization that keeps them awake at night, and this is exactly what is happening. The very person who wounded you is being confronted by memories, confronted by choices, confronted by truth. But wait. This is not even the revelation Michael wanted me to share. The real message comes next, and it may explain why your life has felt strange recently. Have you felt exhausted for no reason? Have you felt like something big is about to happen? Have you felt caught between an old chapter and a new beginning? That feeling is not your imagination. You are standing at a spiritual crossroads. One road leads back into pain, the other leads into purpose, and heaven is urging you to keep moving forward. Because the moment you stop chasing people, God starts revealing who truly belongs in your life. Read that again. The moment you stop chasing people, God starts revealing who truly belongs in your life. This is why some relationships ended. This is why some doors closed. This is why certain people disappeared. You thought it was rejection, but Michael says it was protection. Protection from what? The answer may shock you. There were conversations you never heard, motives you never saw, intentions hidden beneath smiles. And if God had shown you everything at once, it would have broken your heart. So heaven protected you through distance, protected you through delays, protected you through unanswered questions, but now, The season is changing. The truth is approaching. And the person who hurt you is approaching a moment they cannot avoid. A moment where silence becomes impossible. A moment where what was hidden becomes visible. A moment where accountability arrives. Yet Michael says there is a danger many chosen ones face. When justice finally comes, the temptation to become bitter, the temptation to seek revenge, the temptation to celebrate someone else's downfall. Do not fall into that trap. Because your blessing is bigger than revenge, your destiny is greater than their mistake, and the miracle God is preparing requires a heart free from bitterness. That is why heaven has been teaching you patience. Not because God forgot you, but because God was preparing you, preparing your character, preparing your spirit, preparing your future. And what is coming next will prove it. Because Michael says a sudden revelation is closer than you think. A conversation, a confession, an unexpected message, an unexpected encounter, something that exposes what has remained hidden. When it happens, do not panic, do not react emotionally. Observe, listen, pray. Because the information you receive will help you understand why certain events unfolded the way they did. And once you understand, the weight you've carried for so long will begin to lift. But there is still one final mystery, one final piece nobody expects. The person who hurt you is not the only one changing. You are changing too. In fact, the transformation happening inside you may be the biggest miracle of all. Because the version of you that was wounded is not the version of you that will walk into this next season. You are becoming stronger, wiser, more discerning, more spiritually aware, and that growth is making darkness uncomfortable, which is why resistance increased, which is why obstacles appeared, which is why some days felt impossible. The enemy hoped you would quit before reaching this moment, but you're still here, still standing, still believing. And heaven sees that. Archangel Michael sees that. God sees that. And in the next part of this message, Michael reveals the exact sign that confirms the silence is breaking and why the next few days could change everything you thought you knew. And in the next few days, pay attention. Not to the noise around you, not to the opinions of people, not to the fear trying to enter your mind. Pay attention to the signs. Because Archangel Michael says the confirmation you have been waiting for is already moving toward you. You may not recognize it at first. In fact, it may arrive in a form you never expected. A conversation, a name, a sudden memory, an unexpected phone call, a message appearing at the exact moment you need it. Something that seems ordinary, yet carries extraordinary meaning. This is why you must remain spiritually alert. Because heaven often whispers before it shouts, and many people miss miracles because they are looking for thunder while God is speaking through a whisper. Listen carefully, because what Michael revealed next is deeply personal. There is someone watching your life from a distance, someone who never expected you to keep going, someone who thought your spirit would break, someone who believed the pain they caused would permanently damage your future. But they were wrong. Every day you survived became evidence against their expectations. Every step forward became proof that God's hand remained on your life. And now, that reality is becoming impossible for them to ignore. The very strength they underestimated is becoming visible. The very favor they doubted is beginning to manifest. The very destiny they tried to stop is starting to unfold. But there is something else, something most chosen ones never realize. The attack was never only about your past, it was about your future. The enemy saw something ahead of you. Something valuable, something significant, something powerful. A blessing, a breakthrough, a divine assignment. And because darkness could not destroy what God placed inside you, it attempted to delay you, distract you, discourage you, confuse you. That explains so much, doesn't it? It explains why certain battles felt larger than they should have. It explains why some wounds seemed deeper than normal. It explains why certain seasons felt unfair. You weren't fighting ordinary opposition. You were encountering resistance connected to your purpose. And now, The resistance is weakening. The walls are cracking. The pressure is shifting because heaven has decided it is time. Time for answers, time for clarity, time for revelation. Yet before those answers arrive, Michael says there is one lesson you must understand, the lesson of release. You cannot carry old chains into a new season. You cannot hold yesterday's pain while reaching for tomorrow's promise. You cannot embrace God's future while gripping the wounds of the past. Somebody needs to hear this. The chapter ended. Even if you never received the apology. The chapter ended. Even if you never received closure, the chapter ended. Even if questions remain unanswered. Because closure does not come from another person. True closure comes from God, and once heaven closes a door. But by unfinished emotions, the pain remains because the attachment remains. The wound remains because the expectation remains. Yet God is calling you higher, higher than bitterness, higher than regret, higher than disappointment, higher than resentment. Why? Because what is coming requires emotional strength. The next chapter cannot be entered with the mindset of the previous chapter. And this brings us to the revelation Michael said would surprise many viewers. The person who hurt you is experiencing consequences you cannot see. Not necessarily public consequences, not necessarily dramatic consequences, but spiritual consequences, internal consequences, consequences that arrive when a soul becomes separated from peace. Because there is something people rarely talk about. A person can appear successful while silently suffering. A person can appear happy while privately struggling. A person can appear confident while secretly feeling convicted. Never assume appearances tell the full story. Heaven sees deeper, far deeper, and what heaven sees is what matters. Now pay close attention, because this next section may explain something strange you've been feeling. Have you noticed an unusual sense of anticipation, as if something is about to happen, as if a chapter is ending? If life is preparing to turn a page, that feeling is significant. Michael says many chosen ones are entering a season of acceleration. Things that seem delayed begin moving. Opportunities appear, doors open, connections align, resources arrive, answers emerge. Not because of luck, not because of coincidence, but because timing matters. And divine timing is never late. Read that again. Divine timing is never late. It may feel late, it may seem delayed, it may test your patience, but it is never late. Everything arrives when heaven determines you are prepared to receive it. That includes justice. That includes restoration. That includes breakthrough. That includes truth. And that includes the revelation concerning the person who hurt you. Now imagine something. Imagine carrying a secret for years. Imagine pretending nothing happened. Imagine convincing yourself nobody will ever know. Then suddenly, signs begin appearing, circumstances begin shifting, conversations begin changing, opportunities to remain silent begin disappearing. This is the position Michael says that person is approaching, not because you forced it, not because you demanded it, but because truth naturally rises, just as the sun rises, just as light enters darkness. Truth eventually emerges. And when it does, do not become distracted. Because your story is not about them. Your story is about what God is doing in you. Never forget that. One of the greatest mistakes chosen ones make is allowing former pain to become their permanent identity. You are not merely the person who was betrayed. You are not merely the person who was rejected. You are not merely the person who was abandoned. You are the person God preserved, God strengthened, God guided, God protected, God prepared. That identity is far more powerful, and Michael says it is time to embrace it. The old version of you survived. The new version of you will thrive. There is a difference. Survival is important, but thriving is transformational. For too long you've focused on making it through. Now heaven wants to show you what it looks like to flourish, to live again, to dream again, to trust again, to believe again, to hope again, and yes, to love again. Not necessarily romantic love, but love for life, love for purpose, love for the future God designed for you. Because pain has a way of shrinking vision. Pain narrows perspective. Pain convinces people that tomorrow will resemble yesterday. But Michael says tomorrow is not yesterday. The next season is not the previous season, and what God is building cannot be measured by what you've already experienced. Something greater is ahead, much greater. This is why the enemy fought so hard. This is why discouragement intensified. This is why confusion increased, because breakthrough was approaching. Have you ever noticed that storms often become strongest just before they pass? The winds intensify, the clouds darken, the pressure increases. Then suddenly, the sky begins clearing. Michael says many chosen ones are standing in that exact moment. The pressure has been intense, but the sky is beginning to clear. You may not fully see it yet heaven sees it. The angels see it. And soon, you will see it too. That is why giving up now would be a mistake. That is why surrendering now would be a mistake. That is why abandoning hope now would be a mistake. You are closer than you realize, much closer, closer to answers, closer to healing, closer to truth, closer to freedom, closer to restoration, closer to your breakthrough. And here comes the part that Michael repeated 3 times. 3 times. As if heaven wanted to make absolutely certain you heard it. Do not fear what is being revealed. Do not fear what is coming into the light. Do not fear the truth. Truth is not your enemy. Truth is your liberation. Even uncomfortable truth. Even painful truth. Even unexpected truth. Because once truth arrives, confusion loses power, and confusion has held too much power over your life already. No more. The fog is lifting. The mystery is ending. The hidden is emerging. And the silence. The silence cannot continue forever. The person who hurt you cannot remain silent forever. The truth cannot remain buried forever. The answers cannot remain hidden forever, because heaven has already begun moving pieces into position, and when the appointed moment arrives, everything will make sense. Not immediately, not all at once, but enough for you to understand why God allowed certain paths to close, why certain people left, why certain opportunities disappeared, why certain delays occurred. One day you will look back and realize something remarkable. The very events you questioned most were actually protecting your future. Imagine that. The disappointment that protected you, the delay that protected you, the rejection that protected you, the closed door that protected you, the unanswered prayer that protected you. Sometimes God's greatest blessings arrive disguised as interruptions, and Michael says this truth is about to become clear. Very clear. So if you've been wondering whether God sees you, He does. If you've been wondering whether heaven remembers your tears, it does. If you've been wondering whether justice matters, it does. If you've been wondering whether your story still has purpose, it absolutely does. Because this is not the end of your story. This is the turning point. The chapter where everything begins shifting. The chapter where truth emerges. The chapter where healing deepens. The chapter where purpose expands. The chapter where faith becomes sight. And when that moment arrives, you will understand why you had to survive everything that came before it. Because nothing was wasted. Not the tears. Not the waiting. Not the heartbreak. Not the loneliness. Not the uncertainty. God was using every piece, every lesson, every challenge, every setback, to prepare you for what comes next, and what comes next is bigger than you think. And that season may become one of the most powerful seasons of your entire life. Not because everything suddenly becomes easy, not because every problem instantly disappears, not because every question receives an immediate answer, but because this is the season where you finally begin seeing what heaven has been doing all along. For years, you saw pieces, fragments, moments that seemed disconnected. You saw tears without understanding the purpose. You saw delays without understanding the protection. You saw endings without understanding the new beginnings hidden behind them. But Michael says the veil is beginning to lift, And what you are about to understand will change the way you view your entire journey. Because the story was never only about the person who hurt you. It was never only about betrayal. Never only about rejection. Never only about loss. Those things were chapters. Painful chapters. Important chapters. But not the entire story. The greater story has always been about transformation. Your transformation. The person you were becoming. The strength being built inside you. The wisdom being developed within you. The spiritual discernment being awakened through every challenge. And now, that transformation is becoming visible, not only to you, but to others. People are noticing changes. They may not say anything, but they see it. They see the resilience. They see the maturity. They see the peace that wasn't there before. They see the confidence that survived the storm. And this is creating something unexpected. It is creating conviction in those who once underestimated you, especially the person who hurt you. Because there is something deeply unsettling about watching someone rise after you expected them to remain broken. There is something powerful about witnessing God's restoration in a life you thought would remain wounded. And Michael says this is exactly what is happening. The very people who assumed your story was over are beginning to realize they misunderstood the ending. Because God was still writing, still building, still preparing, still working behind the scenes. Now listen carefully, because Michael revealed a mystery that many chosen ones need to hear. Not every delay was caused by opposition. Some delays were caused by preparation. There is a difference. Opposition tries to stop you. Preparation equips you. Opposition blocks progress. Preparation strengthens character. Opposition creates obstacles. Preparation creates readiness. And sometimes the two look very similar, which is why many people become discouraged. They mistake preparation for punishment. They mistake waiting for abandonment. They mistake silence for absence. But heaven has been present the entire time. Working quietly, working faithfully, working strategically, positioning people, aligning circumstances, protecting opportunities, guiding outcomes, even when you couldn't see it. Especially when you couldn't see it. That is why faith matters so much. Faith allows you to trust what your eyes cannot yet confirm. Faith allows you to believe what your circumstances cannot yet explain. Faith allows you to continue walking when logic suggests stopping. And Michael says your faith has carried you farther than you realize, farther than fear predicted, farther than doubt expected, farther than your enemies imagined. You are still here, still standing, still believing, still moving forward. That matters, more than you know, because every step you took in faith became evidence that darkness could not defeat what God established. Now let's return to the revelation. The revelation concerning the person who hurt you. Michael says there is a shift taking place within them, a shift they never anticipated. For a long time they convinced themselves they were justified. They convinced themselves their choices carried no lasting consequences. They convinced themselves they could simply move on. But truth has a way of resurfacing, not because it seeks revenge, but because it seeks resolution. And the closer truth comes, the more difficult silence becomes. Imagine carrying words you know need to be spoken. Imagine carrying guilt you know needs to be addressed. Imagine carrying memories you know cannot remain hidden forever. That burden grows heavier over time, not lighter, heavier. And Michael says that burden is growing, not because heaven desires suffering, but because heaven desires honesty. Truth cannot heal what remains concealed. Truth cannot restore what remains hidden. Truth cannot free what remains trapped in darkness, which is why revelation matters, why exposure matters, why honesty matters, and why the silence cannot continue indefinitely. But here is where many chosen ones make a mistake. They become so focused on what another person might say that they miss what God is already doing. Don't make that mistake. Whether the apology comes or not, God is still working. Whether the confession arrives or not, God is still restoring. whether accountability happens publicly or privately. God is still moving. Your healing is not dependent on another person's actions. Your future is not dependent on another person's choices. Your destiny is not dependent on another person's recognition. It never was. Your destiny belongs to God, and that changes everything. Because people are inconsistent, but God is faithful. People change their minds, but God remains constant. People make promises they fail to keep, but God fulfills His word. That is why Michael keeps directing your attention upward, away from human limitations, toward divine possibilities. Because the greatest breakthrough coming into your life is not merely external, it is internal. The breakthrough of perspective, the breakthrough of freedom, the breakthrough of understanding, the breakthrough of peace. Peace that no longer depends on circumstances. Peace that no longer depends on validation. Peace that no longer depends on outcomes. Peace rooted in trust. Peace rooted in faith. Peace rooted in God. That kind of peace changes everything, and it is growing within you right now, even if you don't fully recognize it. Now pause for a moment. Think about the person you were 1 year ago. Think about your fears, your doubts, your struggles, your uncertainty. Then compare that version of yourself to who you are today. You have grown. Perhaps more than you realize. You have learned lessons, developed strength, gained wisdom, survived challenges, overcome obstacles. And every one of those experiences has prepared you for what comes next. Because Michael says the next chapter requires a stronger version of you. Not a perfect version, a stronger version, a wiser version, a more discerning version, a more spiritually aware version. And that is exactly who you are becoming. This is why the battle was so intense. The greater the assignment, the greater the preparation. The greater the purpose, the greater the training, the greater the destiny, the greater the refinement. And heaven has been refining you, not to harm you, but to prepare you, not to weaken you, but to strengthen you, not to destroy you, but to position you for opportunities, position you for influence, position you for impact, position you for blessings greater than you currently imagine. Now here comes one of the most important parts of Michael's message. The chapter ahead will require courage, because new beginnings always do. Many people pray for change, then become afraid when change arrives. Many people pray for open doors, then hesitate when those doors appear. Many people pray for new opportunities, then doubt themselves when opportunities come. Do not allow fear to steal what faith has been building. Do not allow hesitation to cancel what heaven has prepared. When the door opens, walk through it. When the opportunity appears, consider it prayerfully. When the confirmation arrives, trust what God has already shown you. Because Michael says confirmations are increasing, signs are increasing, alignment is increasing, clarity is increasing, and the closer you move toward your purpose, the more obvious these things become. You will begin noticing patterns, unexpected connections, meaningful encounters, perfect timing, moments that seem too precise to be coincidence. That is because they are not coincidence. They are reminders. Reminders that God is actively involved in your journey. Reminders that heaven remains engaged in your story. Reminders that you are not walking alone. And perhaps that is the greatest revelation of all. You were never alone. Not during the betrayal,